Today, I'm going to attempt to make this Fender Strat tune to E standard chug. And I'm going to make a demo song, show you guys exactly how I did it as someone who predominantly plays low-tuned modern metal. Doing this is not an easy task, but I have come prepared. At first glance, everything may appear to be normal, but I do have a couple tricks up my sleeve. Number one, I have bare knuckle Cobra rail pickups in this Strat. These are swapped out. They were originally just Fender pickups. Now they are these really high output, really modern sounding pickups built for metal, but in a Strat. Number two, I have the Bomber overdrive pedal from M2 Labs. They are the sponsors of this video and we'll get into this in a little bit. Number three, most importantly, I myself am a metal player. All of these things, whether it's the pedal, the guitar, or myself, should help in making this E standard tune Strat play metal. My signal path right now is my guitar, going straight into the Bomber overdrive. These are the settings that I have on there. And then from there, it's going into the Archetype Gajira plugin. And obviously Archetype Gajira is a great plugin for metal, but the pedal is actually doing a decent amount because when I turn the pedal off, it just kind of sounds a little bit flaccid and it doesn't really give it that push that you'd want out of a metal tone. So just to give you guys a comparison, this is what it sounds like with the pedal on. And this is what it sounds like when the pedal is turned off. So as you can probably tell, it does give it that top end push. It really makes it sound a little bit more like stringy. It almost like brings out the stratty sound out of the guitar, going into the front end of the amp anyway. Now, because this is tuned in standard, I'm actually needing to do quite a bit different to what I usually do. I mainly play in drop tuning. I've obviously learned guitar in standard when I was a wee little lad a long time ago, like 20 years ago now, but I just haven't played in standard tuning, so much so that I don't even have a guitar in standard tuning. I had to tune this up from drop D. So all of my usual like moves and octavey licks that I kind of do in a modern metal context anyway, I kind of had to like think outside the box for this one. Instinctively, I found myself going to more of like a thrashier kind of thing, and maybe that's just because, you know, my association with standard E and metal is thrash, but you know, things like tritones, things like gallops, fast alternate picking, all that stuff, that's what I immediately jumped to the second that I started trying to make something. And what ended up coming out of it was just stuff like this, like weird chromaticisms, like all that stuff that I would never really do in a modern metal context, because what I would do in that context is more like all that stuff, which does sound cool in standard E, but it's not really the same. Just thinking off the dome now, there's a great video by Keyan talking about the relations between chords and the different notes and stuff like that. And he makes a point in saying that when you tune lower, it sounds less jarring, even if you're playing chords with notes a semitone apart or something like that. But when you're in really high tunings, or standard tuning in this case, notes like, or chords, sorry, like this, sound really jarring and really evil because there's physics behind it. It's like the way that higher tunings clash with each other as opposed to lower tunings. Like there's more oscillation, I guess, between the two notes. That's why everything you do just sounds evil. So when you combine that notion with like the intent of you actually playing it on the guitar, and you start doing the gallops and you start picking hard and you start picking in weird rhythms and very like unconventional, jarring kind of. Like that was just a bunch of nothing. It was literally just a chord where I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 with like some weird high string noise in there. It means nothing. It's a bunch of nothing, but it sounds cool in the context. And again, it's the intent of how you play it. And once you start putting drums to it and you start recording it into a DAW, things like that can start to sound really, really cool, even if they are just a bunch of nothing. decided that in the demo song, I just want to go all out swinging as soon as it starts, just really like full on typical metal riff. But then as it goes on, I kind of want to blend in the best of both worlds and kind of go more towards that like melodic modern metal type of sound, even though I'm in standard tuning. So just picturing it now, I guess like the first riff would be something like some sort of weird gallop pattern, something like that. Maybe there's like an interlude section. Like really long, evil sounding chords. And then to kind of just like ease it out towards the end, again, going to that more like melodic style of playing. So like chords like that. Maybe get a bit evil. I don't know, we'll see where we end up. If you watch the channel, yes, I am using Logic. It's new. I just got a new Mac. I'm getting used to it. Please bear with me because I am still learning the ropes of Logic. The drums that I'm using is the GGD One Kit Wonder Metal. I just wanted to sound good, nice, quick and easy. And that's, I guess, the whole point of the One Kit Wonder series. And then these are the drums that I've programmed for it. So if we expand this MIDI here and zoom in, you can see that there's a lot of different notes everywhere. So with the gallopy stuff, I guess like the first thing that I was drawn to was just doing some sort of blast beat or something like that. I'm not really good at programming blast beats. Please do not take this as my best example of drum programming because again, I just wanted to make this nice and quick and easy. I didn't want to sit here and program velocities of every second snare and a blast beat. So this is what we have. Let's go back to the start. So as you can tell, it's super fast, super metal, right? But again, making metal isn't so much just about the riffs that you play. There are obviously a lot of other instruments within a composition that you can rely on to give off an energy or give off a vibe. And this vibe just screams metal straight away. I hope I did this blast beat right. I don't know, it sounds right to me. Maybe a drummer can correct me in the comments, but. And I just have like a really linear drum fill because again, I think that's like very metal, not overcomplicating it too much, just having a you know what I mean? And then again, like I said before, I kind of wanted to have like a build-up section of some sort. So just having like a snare roll. Again, please don't judge the programming. It could obviously sound a lot better, but you get the vibe, right? And then it kind of builds up. And then we kind of get into that kind of slow, groovy section, more melodic, more modern metal that I was talking about. We get that halftime groove going, and then we get like a hybrid of the two for the last repeat. And then just a little cheeky surprise at the end. Quickly moving on to the bass. So with modern metal, the bass is usually just following the kick and the guitar. So I kind of kept in that way of thinking, but I did try to kind of like break away from it a little bit. So obviously with like the gallops and stuff, I just wanted the bass and the drums to be really consistent. So the gallops are pretty much the same, but there are certain sections and certain notes where the bass does deviate away from that and instead falls in line with the guitar riff. So that it's one-to-one with that. And especially in the groovy section, it kind of leans towards that as well. So as you can see, we're using gin bass 2, and I'm pretty much just using the 4th string down because, again, standard tuning, right? No need for the 5th string. Pretty straightforward on the bass. It's not rocket science. It never usually is. That is a joke. And then, of course, the riffs. So just to give you an idea before I show the full demo song, this is some of the ideas that came out in the end, and you'll notice that they're very similar. And notice how like the tone is like very kind of like low gain. It's very cutting, even though it's in standard, you know. Again, the overdrive is doing a lot of the heavy lifting as it does in most of my tones. You'll notice that the DI, you know, this DI is printed with the pedal on it, and still like it's not really gaining up the signal. You can still see the transients. You can still see how hard I'm picking on all of that stuff. It just goes to show that the actual tone coming from the overdrive is very low driven, and it's mainly dictated by me again. And I guess that's where it kind of comes back to that third point that I mentioned, where it's like, I'm a metal player, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a Strat or anything else. You know, if you put it in my hands because I play metal, I'll make it sound metal. If you put something in my hands and say play jazz, I just won't be able to do it. And then we got some like backing leads going on, especially in that transition section. Just meant to fill the space, you know what I mean? Because it's just a snare roll and a big long chord, so it would sound a little bit dead if I didn't put something in the background. And then maybe like keeping that going. It's funny, like you can hear the noise coming from the single coil pickups, which is just unavoidable. It is what it is. But there's something very natural, you know, about like, you know, using single coils and standard E tuning, recording metal. You know, usually with the modern metal stuff that I'm producing most of the time, you have to be very, very cautious and very succinct in what you're doing. Whereas with this, because it's a little bit more laid back, you know, there's not as much frequencies clashing because things are actually tuned to where they're meant to be. You can kind of get away with having it sound a little bit raw, having it sound a little bit more DIY, for lack of a better word. So after all that, let's smash it all together and see what I can get my Strat tuned to standard E to sound like in metal. So that was the demo song. That's what I created with these boundaries, and I feel like we should talk about a couple of things. As I was going through the motions of making this track, there were some things that were a little bit different this time around as to what I would typically come across. One thing that became very apparent to me very early was that I actually find it way harder to produce and mix a track like this because it's just simply not what I'm used to. I'm used to playing guitars that are like 7 strings or tuned as low as 8 string, you know, emitting a lot more energy, a lot more low end frequencies, the bass and guitars clashing, all that stuff. And I'm used to my typical tips and tricks, especially in the mixing context, to like aid that and fix that, you know? But with this, because everything was in standard, just the way that it was intended to be, I actually didn't come across any of those problems. On paper, you'd think that would make it easier, but the reality was that I actually found it way harder because all the things that I would do preemptively, like, you know, dial my tones with a little less gain and dial in the bass with a little less gain and make the bass a little bit more stringy and all this stuff and all these typical mixing things that I would do, it just didn't apply. And instead what happened was I had this kind of like empty sounding mix for the most part. And I really had to like do things that I would never do. You know, I had to dial more gain on the amp of the guitar than I usually would. I made the low end of the bass like really loud compared to what I usually do. You know, I was like cranking it thinking like, is this too much? Like the kicks and snares were like really defined in this mix because there wasn't anything clashing with them. So on paper, I guess it is a little easier, but again, within the context of what it is that I typically do, I actually found it a little bit difficult this time around. Another challenge that I kind of alluded to earlier in the video was that I don't really play in standard. Every single guitar that I own, including this one before I started filming this video, this was in drop D. You know, every guitar I have is in drop tuning or some sort of variation of a drop tuning. So when it came time to like write some riffs that weren't in drop tuning, I was like resorting to things that I've really never done before, you know, weird tritone chords, weird rhythms, galloping, thrashy kind of playing that I just never really do. And this is a great example of something that I've said in a lot of other videos before this one, and something that I say to my students all the time, is that if you're ever feeling uninspired or you feel like, you know, you're using the same tricks and the same licks and the same rhythms and all that stuff and you want to break out the box, the best way to break out of it is to put yourself in a box. A six string, I never play six strings anymore. Tune it to standard, I never play in standard, and use a Strat with single coils, which I never do. This is the only Strat that I own, apart from like the weird Chinese knockoff one that I had when I was 5 years old. And in doing so, the end product was something that, again, I would never do, I guess, voluntarily on my own if it was my choice. But all in all, that is what you get when you get a Strat. Tune it to standard and start chugging and play some metal stuff in it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know when the last time you guys played in standard was. Massive shout out to M2 Labs for sponsoring this video. Thank you for sending over the Bomber Overdrive. It worked great in this context. Let me know what other videos you guys want to see, and I'll catch you in the next one.